I titled this podcast early 2023 Dynasty rankings, but Geek, it's not really early rankings. Like this January is the beginning of Dynasty startup season. I mean, I even did one last year in December, I remember. So really appropriately, this is Dynasty startup ranking season. So I think that
year round, right? But one of the best things about Dynasty is you can start drafting a team or focusing in on it right as soon as the season ends. And I actually think I'll take it a step further. I think you want to especially do your rankings right after the season is fresh in your mind, before all the poison from the outside hopium smokers.
Yeah, I would even say, and not everyone has the time to do this, but as people that make professional rankings like yourself and like I do, I try to my best. And I know during the season you're a little bit more DFS focused, and then you go maniacally into the Dynasty rankings and all that stuff off season. But I try to keep my rankings dynamic, like as we move along, just so when the time comes to officially post them and that they're somewhat in order. So, by the way, I'm Alan Seslowsky from RotoWire. We are restarting our off-season podcast in the RotoWire podcast feed. And as usual, the Geek from the Sharp app and DFS Army is our first guest, our most frequent guest, and for good reason, because today what we're going to do is we are going to just do a first pass through basically the first two rounds of a Dynasty startup draft. Meaning, a single quarterback. We'll work in some super flex takes, being that, but what's funny, what I found out, Geek, is that a lot of people don't want to do super flex right now because the quarterback position is so in flux. There's only about like 8 or 9 quarterbacks that are guaranteed locked in starters for 2023.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I was, as I was going through my quarterback rankings, and I wasn't sure if we were going to do super flex as a focus or not. But even in regular standard season long redraft, all of it, the scarcity has become a thing at the quarterback position, which it really hadn't been. And just given like QB 12, I mean, you're in the Deshaun Watson zone. Like it is not that good.
I'm happy
you had 12 guys and you kind of had a hard time finding much of a difference between 1 or 12. There is a massive difference now. And that's reflective in where you have to take these quarterbacks I would say, even in this startup non-super flex concept.
Yeah, I mean, Deshaun Watson, I'm pumped to take him at quarterback 11, quarterback 12. It's like after that tier that it gets, because at least he's the starter. And we'll get into the rankings, but here's like what I have after Watson. And again, we'll get into Samantha, but like Tua, Kirk Cousins, Trey Lance, Kenny Pickett, Jared Goff. Now, those guys are not guaranteed at this point to be starting next year. We think Goff is going to be and all that stuff, but 1 through 12, that's what I'm saying is so we'll get into all that. So let's just get right into our rankings. Now, what I find fascinating about the first round in Dynasty startups is that there's going to be this big productive age versus youth clash. Now, there's going to be a couple wide receivers that I think everyone's going to have at the consensus top of Dynasty, but then you really get into like the unproven youth versus the Tyreek Hill types. So where in general do you think your Dynasty philosophy is going to fall in the first round of startup drafts this year in 2023?
So I'm just going to give a more overall philosophy about it, right? I've built a lot of Dynasty teams. And I think for me, one of the biggest things that I do is there's an understanding, especially I understand that the wide receiver position just lasts longer than running backs. So the running back window of usefulness is really like, it's about 4 years. It's much shorter.
Wait a second. 4 years of the elite guys.
Yes. Well, I'm talking about the best guys.
Right. Because the normal running back window of like the Devin Singletary types is like 2 useful years, 3 100%. Useful years.
But I'm talking about first rounders. Yeah. So like, I'll give you an idea. First round running backs, Saquon Barkley is going to be in that sort of discussion. But Saquon Barkley's at the tail end of his 4-year viability time frame. Same thing with Christian McCaffrey. Those are the kind of guys that if you're taking those players, man, you better win this year or next year, or you blew it. right? Whereas if I take a young wide receiver, like, all right, we all love Jefferson and Jamar Chase, but if I take a CeeDee Lamb, he's young, a Jalen Waddle, my window is 8-9 seasons, 7-8 seasons. It's a much longer time frame to make. So the way I look at Dynasty, if I take a player that's expiring and I don't win a championship in that window, I blew it. Like, man, I can't get that asset back during their prime. There's nothing. I can't trade this player away and recover that. You have to win when you take those kind of players as well.
But I think that gets into the whole running back versus wide receiver debate much more than it does just the age of the same position. So that's what I'm talking about. Like my original point was Tyreek Hill, who's, was he here? Let me just look up his exact age right here. So Tyreek Hill, I have it right here. No, he's 28.9. Okay. So he's going to be 29 next year versus someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's 23. Now, again, or DK Metcalf, who's 25. So I think that those are all reasonable clashes because what we know is that some dynasty rankers are going to have DK Metcalf ahead of Tyreek Hill, but the redraft rankings, when they come out, it's not even, they're going to be multiple rounds difference between those players. So I think that the real difference between dynasty fantasy football and classic redraft that we all began playing is the way we value the same player.
Absolutely. I'll tell you right off the bat, in your dynasty draft, you're going to have to make a decision. And I'll go with that player, Tyreek Hill, because this will be a decision point for a lot of people. Do you want Tyreek Hill, who we know is amazing the next year or two? Or would you like Garrett Wilson, who's a rookie coming off his rookie year and looks really good?
No longer a rookie, right? No longer a rookie.
But he's a first-year player with a potential 8 season to 12 season. You don't know how long a wide receiver can last, but a long potential career ahead of him. Or Devontae Smith, who is breaking out into a superstar. Or a T. Higgins. Like, those guys would never go anywhere near, even Olave, right? Those guys are going nowhere near Tyreek Hill in your redraft. But I would argue you should take them ahead of Tyreek Hill in your dynasty league.
All right. So we're not necessarily going to do a mock draft today. What I want to do is just get an overall discussion on rankings. And we're not going to, for this podcast, we're not going to debate, hey, I have this guy at 6. No, you should have him at 7. Like, what we're going to try to do is group these guys into like 4 or 5 major tiers. And, those are top half. The tier levels are top half of the first round locked in, right? Running backs that are worth top 6 picks, back end picks, and then fringe first rounders, and then locked in second rounders. So those are the tier groupings, and that'll make up, because when you do a dynasty startup draft, you need to have those top 2 picks have as much upside and as little risk as possible. Because like you said, that's going to be the foundation of your team for, I'm going to call it, the next 3 years, right? In Dynasty, we always talk about 2 to 3 year windows, but your first round picks need to be 3 to 3 year windows. I'm going to call it minimum. So top of the first half, are we in agreement here that any dynasty draft that we're in that's not super flex, Justin Jefferson is the 1.1? Can you even think of another player that should be ahead of him in dynasty?
No, I mean, I have a very soft argument, for Jamar Chase. And I'll make it only for the devil's advocate component of it, which is Jamar Chase is locked in with a stud quarterback for multiple years, where Justin Jefferson's QB situation could be in flux in the next year or two. So when I think out very long term, I can make a very, very light argument for Chase ahead of. And you know what? If somebody took Chase first, I'm not going to argue with them.
Right. Okay, so let me rephrase the question, because I think you make a good point about the quarterback insulation. And that's when we do dynasty rankings, it's not just ranking the player of that year. Everybody knows that. It's not just saying how good is this player. It's what's the team context, what's their contract situation. And you bring up a great point. Jamar Chase has Joe Burrow, who we all agree is a top 3, top 4, maybe top 2 NFL quarterback. And he's going to have him for the next half decade. So reframing the question, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, they are a tier of their own, a top, or is CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, are they in that tier? So tier 1 is Chase and Jefferson.
Yeah, not even close. And by the way, it's not close with any of the running backs either. It's those two, and that's it. And then so if you're fortunate enough to have pick 1 or 2 in your dynasty draft, you do have a little bit of an edge there. This is a great year to have that a top 2 pick.
Okay. All right. So you talked about the running back position. Now I'm just going to read off a bunch of names, right? And they all have different pros, and they all have, kind of warts on them, so to speak. So of these 7 names, Jonathan Taylor, Kenneth Walker, Saquon Barkley, Travis Etienne, Breece Hall, Christian McCaffrey. Do any of those names or any of those guys locked in first-round picks in Dynasty?
Yes.
Which ones for you?
So for me, it's not Christian McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley at all. I'm not trying to take either one of those guys in the first round, certainly. But Jonathan Taylor deserves a spot. He's young still. He's got a lot of he's got a lot of momentum. His team's got some question marks, but he's a workhorse, and when he's been in the game, he's been spectacular. I love Breece Hall. I think Breece Hall transformed the Jets. Same deal, young. You might get him a little bit later than he should.
Geek, stop the clock here. We're going to take a guy coming off an ACL injury in round 1 of your startup draft. Like, you're comfortable doing that? Like, knowing that you won't have him probably for September, and you may have him compromised for the rest of the season. You're okay doing that?
I don't think that an October injury will still have an effect on a young player at the start. I believe he will be back. Now,
of course he'll be back.
I mean, I believe he'll be back for training camp, like that. He will play. He will be in training camp in June.
We're going to have this argument again about ACL injuries.
We see it. I don't know that he's going to have the best year this year because coming off the injury, but yes, I like Breece Hall.
No, I like Breece Hall, but we're talking about let's talk
either way, say you're the youth, but that guy transformed the team. But yeah, you're Kenny Walker, you're Travis Etienne, and Javonte. I like that group.
All right, so here we go. So we agree that Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson are pick 1 and 2 in some order. If you were on the clock at pick 3, I'm right now in the RotoWire rankings, I have CeeDee Lamb as the 3rd overall pick. Are we there?
Yeah, I'm fine with CeeDee Lamb there.
Is there anyone else that you would even consider putting there? I don't think so. I think Lamb sits on a tier of his own.
Jalen Waddle is really similar for me to Lamb.
Well, I'll tell you why. But I'll tell you why is that Lamb is the unquestioned 1A, and you talked about the quarterback situation as of time of this recording, January of 2023. I can't tell you for sure that 2 is ever going to play football again. I think he's going to, but I'm not sure he's going to. So what are they going to be in the veteran market? What are they Tom Brady, Jimmy Garoppolo? Right. We can go through that whole thing. So isn't that enough of a separator if you're doing a draft today to put Lamb on his own tier?
Yeah, that's a fair one right there. And that's a perfect separator. Again, a more stable quarterback situation for CeeDee Lamb. Why not?
Yep. Okay. All right. So far, we're talking about our Dynasty startup rankings for 2023. And the Geek and I are in agreement that 1, 2, 3 should be wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. Of course, we're talking about PPR leagues. We're not talking about Superflex. Now, let's bring that question up. Even in a single quarterback, at the top of this live stream, we talked about that there is possibly instability like we've never seen at the quarterback position. Does that mean that the big 5, Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow? Did I say Joe Burrow twice? No.
We got to remove Justin Herbert from the big 5.
But he's still, even if he's at the bottom of the big 5, he's in that big 5.
Yeah. He's not worth. So you just
say, are any quarterbacks worth a late first round pick in Dynasty 1 QB?
Yes. And this is an adjustment from thinking for many, many years. And it's because of the state of the QB position. If you were in season long this year, everybody who's watching this, they played in a season long team. Look at who won. Just check it out. Who won? Oh, it was the guy who had Mahomes. It was the guy who had Josh Allen, right? This year, there was a massive edge to having an elite quarterback. And I think you can grab Josh Allen in the first round of your dynasty or Pat Mahomes and have that player. So I'll put it like this. If you're towards the end of the first round and you're making a decision between a Christian McCaffrey, who's a 2-year stud running back, right, with injury potential, versus Pat Mahomes, who is a 9-year to 10-year, you never have to worry about your quarterback position in this league kind of guy. I would argue that you're better off shifting, getting the quarterback, even in non-super flex. And this is a departure from my approach to fantasy football in general. But in a long term, and especially if you're going to play out the league for a long term, don't do a dynasty if you don't plan on playing it out, by the way.
By the way, a quick promotional note before we continue our 2023 Dynasty rankings is that I'm going to be hosting a new show, Geek, on SiriusXM. It's called the Dynasty Hour. We've had people asking about it. Yeah, it starts this week, which is the week of Wild Card Weekend. It's going to air. It's going to air live during the games. I'll get the exact schedule out. I'll put it on my Twitter, but it'll be available on demand. So, I listen to most of my shows on demand. It's so hard to listen live. It's going to air twice on Saturday, twice on Sunday. Our first couple guests are going to be Jordan McNamara from Football Guys, and then Matt Kelly from, of course, from Player Profile. You'll be on there in the coming weeks after that. So look for the Dynasty Hour on SiriusXM. Be premiering in January, and it'll also be on demand. You just search RotoWire or the Dynasty Hour. All right, getting back to our Dynasty ranking of 2023. You mentioned Christian McCaffrey, all right? Christian McCaffrey, even though he's going to be, let's see, right now his age, Geek, is 26 and a half. So he'll basically, next year is his age 27 season. But don't you think that his type of game, the pass catching game, and in the context of that offense, basically, if you're going to, it shaves another couple, well, it adds another couple years of productive value. I am very comfortable taking Christian McCaffrey in the first round of my Dynasty startup, especially towards the middle or the end. Are you going to, so when I'm seeing you're shaking your head no, and that's okay.
No,
so why, like when you're getting towards like pick 7, pick 8, and you're faced with choices like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who, by the way, I believe is a first round pick in Dynasty startup drafts, right? I mean, forget his 4th round draft pedigree. He has, surpassed that. So
he's proven himself to be a wide receiver that you want and can be a WR1 on your team for a while.
Yep. So why no McCaffrey? Because as we talked about, if you can get 2 seasons of like high end production, maybe a third is I know that we're ageist, right? We're ageist as
I'm going to give you the overview. I look at,
by the way, give the McCaffrey case. There's a knocking right here. Just keep talking.
Right, do what you're knocking. And here's my case for McCaffrey, my overview for Dynasty in general. Your team is like a basket of stocks. There's a value to it, and each asset that you have has a value, and your team's chances of winning essentially are the value of the entire basket of players that you have in your Dynasty team. So when you're buying effectively a Christian McCaffrey, you're paying top dollar for him right now. He is a declining asset. It's like your car. As soon as you drive him out of the lot, he is going down in value. Right. So for Christian McCaffrey at 26, 27, next year, he'll be almost unsellable. And that's the reason you're taking a player in the first round that if you went and tried to sell him next year, he's almost unsellable. Whereas,
wait a second, stop. I'm going to stop you there because this is a common Dynasty thing. Why does someone always have to be sellable? Why? Let me just, this is something that my friend Jordan McNamara always says. What do you care about the price of your house if you're going to live in it?
Because you only get to live in this house for a year or two. I have a Dynasty house that I've got. You're essentially saying instead of getting a new set of windows on the house that you like put some plastic on it, it's going to peel off. The player is going to expire. The last thing you want is to try to be selling a 28. Good. I'll give you an example. Go try to sell Austin Eckler in the offseason.
Right, but why would you want to sell him? I mean, if you don't you use him to help you win a championship?
No, your team is a basket of assets, and there's a total value to the basket, be it in trades or winning now, right? And the goal, if your asset,
the goal is to win now, Geek.
The goal is to win, but the goal is to maintain a winning capacity. Every time you have players declining as an asset, you can't replace it. So if I have young assets on the rise, I can also get out of them right at peak value, replaced with fresh young assets on the rise. That's how you got to win a dynasty long term. So
this is where the Geek and I have fundamental differences, and it's okay. And by the way, I'll be first to admit that neither one of these strategies or philosophies is wrong. One of them is push all in and then trade your way out of it and speculate your way out of it with waiver wire, rookie picks. The other one is constantly be recycling. And I think, Geek, you'll admit when you're recycling, you do risk losing a year or two of high-end value from the Derrick Henry types, the Austin Eckler types.
Sure, but I think your approach is too risky or can be too risky. I'm very much when I look at my team, I try to very quickly assess, all right, is this a team that's competitive? Can I win the championship? If I can't win the championship, or I don't have a shot at really making a run, I want to get out of assets on the decline. So a Christian McCaffrey, if I looked at my team next year and was like, oh, I can't win. I'm not set up to win. Trey Lance got hurt this year. I only have one quarterback. Whatever the reasoning is, a player like that, you got to get out of him, because next year he's going to be worth significantly less.
All right, so
is one injury away from you can't even sell him for a first round pick.
Where I disagree though is that, and we won't belabor the point. We'll continue on with our ranking show, but McCaffrey in the context of this new offense that he's in, he is basically the ultimate weapon, and his game will age better. He can in 3 years from now, his floor is like being James White, and James White and Danny Woodhead, those type of guys were like RB12. They could still catch 80, 90 passes in the season, only have about 500-600 rushing yards. And I think McCaffrey has that in him. Okay.
Yeah,
so
it's fair. But like I said, I just, in the first round, I don't think he'll be going in the first round of most drafts. I think he will drop. And
I agree with you there. I agree with you there that dynasty players, as they'll see that 27 on his profile card and be like, ooh, I can't have that. But he will be a second round pick. He was last year at age 26. So, but he was coming off the injuries. Yeah. All right. So to review, we have the two wide receivers, Chase and Jefferson at the top, 1, 2. We had Lamb at 3. And then I think the conversation gets interesting at 4. These are the players that I have ranked right now at 4, 5, 6. I have AJ Brown, Kenneth Walker, and Travis Etienne. Do you have any other? Do you agree that those three are like the next grouping? And is there anyone that you would put in that grouping or take out of that grouping?
I'm assuming you didn't mention Jonathan Taylor by accident.
No, I said Taylor, Etienne, and Ken Walker.
Yeah,
and AJ
Taylor,
Brown.
That grouping. I think you're taking those guys ahead of the Jalen Waddle, who for me would be the next wide receiver up on that group.
Well, let's go there. Let's go there for a second. Let's start with the running backs. Walker and Etienne and Taylor would be and again, I don't care which one of those guys you like. Those are the 3 next running backs that represent upside with youth. Do we agree there?
And Breece Hall.
I'm not going to agree with Breece Hall, because my first round pick, where I'm building my dynasty, is not going to be on a player that's injured. And now that a player that has, quarterback questions, a player that has, a backfield competition. Now, again, Breece Hall is going to be the lead running back when he's healthy, but I'm talking about my first round pick in dynasty fantasy football. All those other guys are fully ahead of him in startup land.
I'm a sucker for the Jets. Breece is not, that's not my reasoning, but I think Breece Hall belongs in that group. And I think, no injury. I have Breece Hall at the top of the group ahead of Kenny Walker and Etienne.
He does have an injury, though, and he does have quarterback questions, and he does have...
I'm not worried about it. Young player, bounced back from an ACL. Travis Etienne had the ACL. We got a bargain on him. I'll happily accept a bargain if I can get it on Breece Hall. Happily. But
you're going to get a bargain, because he's not going to be a top 5, top 8 pick in most startup drafts. I can predict that. Now, of course, we're not going to be talking about the rookies, because there's a lot of hype on Texas running back Bijan Robinson. I mean, 6 foot, 220 pounds, right? I mean, we're going to get into that. And, and if he ends up in the first round as a real NFL first round pick, I mean, he's going to be a first-round startup pick, and I don't think I could tell anybody, if he lands in the right situation, to not take him as the overall RB1. But, for another day. There's going to be so much time to talk about rookies. All right. In that so we mostly agree, except for Breece Hall, that the next tier, though the first tier of running backs is Taylor, Walker, Etienne, in some order. And then here is the next wide receiver grouping that I've put in there. It's AJ Brown, Jalen Waddle, and who was it? AJ Brown, Jalen Waddle, and then I have Amon-Ra St. Brown. And all 3 of those guys I have ahead of the highly productive veterans, Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs and Devontae Adams. So do you agree that those 3 wide receivers go ahead of the 3 aging guys?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, for me, it's not even a question with that group. The real question is, how low do we go before we get to the aging group? Like, who are the players? When do you start where do you take Tyreek? Because, again, I'll let you order Waddle, St. Brown, Metcalf, and AJ Brown.
Well, I'm not putting Metcalf in that group.
Oh, so you just have the trio.
And I have AJ Brown. So I have AJ Brown, Waddle, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Oh, sorry. AJ Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Waddle is the next three. And I would take the highly productive aging veterans ahead of DK Metcalf.
Yeah, see, that's not how I'm doing this. All right. So we definitely differ here because
you would just include Metcalf.
I would not only would I include Metcalf ahead of Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs, quote unquote, the aging group, right?
And Adams,
Devontae, and quote unquote the aging group, right? I would include. Are you ready for this? I would include Devontae Smith. I would include T
as a first round pick,
just ahead of those guys. We're not. I'm not in the first round here. Now we're just talking about where I'm going to take my wide receivers and what wide receiver. I need a wide receiver. When do I say I'm taking Tyreek here?
All right. Let's go through this then. Here's the first round as we mostly agree on, and then I'm going to put you on the clock. All right. At pick 1 and 2 was Chase Jefferson. At pick 3 was CD Lamb. Pick 4, 5, 6 was Taylor, Walker, AJ Brown, ETN, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Waddle. So now you're on the clock around pick 10-ish. What are you doing? And I'll tell you who the options are.
Well, can we go to 11? Because I'm taking Breece Hall.
Okay, so Breece Hall, fine. So he's there. I wouldn't take him there. I understand he's going to be, and we're not including Bijan Robinson. We're going to just pretend that he's not available in a veteran startup draft. So you're at the end of the first round. So this is like pick 11, 12, 13, 14. Like the loop here is where I would suck up some of these. Like I'd be like, okay, I'm starting my draft with Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs. Like, great. What are you doing?
I'm not doing that. Again, that's a great way to win now, by the way. And the person who does that has a great shot of like a 2-year window of being good. But hey, you're doing that really early in the draft, and you better build your whole draft around that. But no, I am not going there. So
I'll tell you why. Hold on, Geek. Let me give you the exact specifics why, and then I want you to think about who you would take there. The reason that if you're picking at the end of the first round, and again, there's an argument for quarterback, there's an argument for Travis Kelce and all that stuff, but the reason I would take, especially in the leagues where most dynasty leagues especially are 3 receivers plus a flex, is the reason I would take those 2 highly productive wide receivers is, like you said, I think there's a reasonable high-end production expectation of 2 years, probably 3 or 4 to still get, top 15 value. But okay, we're only talking about 2-year windows. And then because of how dynasty players play startup drafts, you're still going to get Austin Eckler and Derrick Henry on the next loop around. You're going to have this team that has like 4 first round redraft picks in it. And you are now set up for win now in a way that's so nuclear,
I don't like it. You set yourself up for win now. Let me paint the counter argument. And I know you build a lot of teams that way. And so you and I have drafted a lot of times together and you go different ways. But I don't like it. I'm going to tell you why. You build an old team, right? And they all expire right around the same time. So if you don't win now, if an injury happens Cooper Kupp style, and last year it was Deebo Samuel, it ruins your team, right?
Well, any injury ruins your team. If you have Breece Hall, it ruins your, I'm saying, like, and you took him in a startup draft.
Understandable, but no, it doesn't, because I can wait out an injury for Breece Hall. He can come back, and then I can have a great player for the next 6 years. Whereas, so who I'm taking ahead of those guys? Javonte Williams. And I'm going to tell you right now, because these old dudes, if you don't win now, you're done. You've wasted your assets. Something bad happened. You didn't. Your quarterback and whatever it was, you didn't win now. You put yourself in a situation where your team is going to be garbage for a long period of time. I don't like that. So I like to have this pile of assets that I can trade. I can bring in win now players if I need to, because I've got all these assets that I can trade away. So late in the season, if I feel like I can make a run, all right, I'll pick up an Austin Eckler from the Austin Eckler owner who doesn't want him anymore because he knows he's expiring. He's not winning this year. I feel you can get those veterans, but if you build around a young core, especially at the wide receiver position, which is why I don't like those old wide receivers. I want the young guys that I know will be around for a long time. I can figure it out at some other position groups. But when you have a Stephon Diggs and he's going to turn 31 and you're like 30 and 31, you have these guys like
playing with Josh Allen.
hurt, and now you lost a year and you're like, oh no, that was, he had a 3-year window and I just lost a year and maybe a year and a half. It's too destructive to your team. So you've got to build with the youth in Dynasty, but there's a balance after the first couple rounds. The first few rounds, I need my young studs.
Now, you mentioned Javonte Williams. I don't think he's even in the first or maybe even in the early second round discussion at all because, one, he hasn't produced yet. We all like his talent, but you're going to be able to get a lot of good running backs. The reason I like, again, starting with wide receivers, because when you get back in the end of the third round, you're going to be facing like Najee Harris. You're going to have Miles Sanders, Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, A.J. Dillon. There's going to be a lot of options there. Running Josh Jacobs. We don't know where he's going to land right now. He's a free agent.
Josh Jacobs is on the rise.
Yeah, no, definitely on a rise. But right now he's teamless, right? He doesn't have a team. We don't know where he's going to play. I mean, he could end up in Denver, right? He can end up on the New York Giants. He can end up on the Buffalo Bills, and then his value is suppressed, or at least there's ceiling on it. So we all like the talent. He's still young enough. But I think that's why you really, at the back end of the first round, and I've looked at startup ADP a little bit, you really want to attack wide receivers. Now, if you don't want to go aging guys, if you want to go more youth-based, I just think that you stay away from the running backs there specifically because you are going to have a treasure trove of very startable options in round 3 and 4.
So yeah, and I was just kind of making a point about running backs there generally. But yeah, at the back end of this first round, so to bring it back to sort of the original stuff, where we're talking about the Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams tier. I look at them as position groups. So I look at wide receiver, I look at running back, I kind of separate them a little bit. Like who am I taking ahead of him? And again, for me, I'm moving Chris Olave, I'm moving T. Higgins and Garrett Wilson and Devontae Smith, who I think is massively underrated. By the way,
Drake London
too, new quarterback. I mean, has all of the bona fides. Early first round pick that you want. But check this out. See, here's the thing. Devonta Smith to me is the biggest one. Devonta Smith's had a better year than AJ Brown. You're talking about AJ Brown up in the top trio of super elites. Devonta Smith is every bit what AJ Brown was this year. And he actually had a better year. He actually was more consistent. He has better draft capital. Why do we think of AJ Brown as better than Devonta Smith?
I think that the end of the year production, sure, you can measure that, but I think that the game to game consistency is better for AJ Brown, whereas Devonta Smith has these mega explosions, but he's slightly more volatile. So I believe, and I think the team prioritizes AJ Brown.
Look again. Devonta Smith was not more volatile.
I said the perception. The perception.
Yeah, it's a perception. That's what I'm saying. When you actually look at the numbers, and this is why I brought it up, because we all perceive exactly what you just said. If you actually look at the numbers, it was Devonta Smith that's been consistent, especially the last 7 or 8 weeks of the season. He's very consistent as a wide receiver. And again, there's a perception that AJ Brown is better. And I love AJ Brown, don't get me wrong. And I feel like AJ Brown helped transform the Eagles this year and go fly, Eagles fly. I'm an honorary friend of Ben Franklin, the Philadelphia people. They love me. The Eagles fans, they love me over there.
All right, so
we bleed green together.
So let's get into some of the. We haven't talked about Cooper Kupp. Now, Cooper Kupp, here's the situation. Cooper Kupp is 29 and a half years old, so he's going to be doing that 29-30 season next year. Nobody doubts that Cooper Kupp is one of the top 5 wide receivers in the NFL, but he had the late season injury. Now, the type of injury that he had is not he should be ready for camp. He should have a full camp. Now, the thing that scares me about Cooper Kupp, certainly is a first-round pick. I think he's not going to be a first-round pick. And if he is, it'll just be early on in the season, and then it will. Hold on a second. Let me make this point right here. Is that Sean McVay is now leaning towards not coming back. So in my mind, when I'm doing early startup drafts, I'm going to have to factor in that Sean McVay is not going to be there. Now, Cooper Kupp's enough of a talent to still buoy his value. And I'm not saying he's a scheme-dependent guy, but the offense did so much for Cooper Kupp, right? And if Sean McVay is not going to be there and we don't know who is, that adds a little bit more uncertainty. And I would start thinking about, youth over him, even though I still think that Cooper Kupp, but remember, Cooper Kupp could be wide receiver 15. You don't really want to take that guy in like round 1, So that's where I am on Cooper Kupp. I probably will let someone else I definitely will let someone else take him in the first, and he would probably have to fall to like the 5th or 6th pick in the second round as of right now for me to think about it, knowing the Sean McVay.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that he will not go in the first round. These guys, I think you're way overestimating where Cooper Kupp will go. I think you're overestimating where Davante Adams and that whole group. I think you're in the 3rd round when those guys are still on the board. I think people will.
Early ADP, it doesn't have that. Early ADP has those guys right now, and this is pulling from early drafts, and again, the sample size is not massive.
Like
but
one group that had a draft.
No, there's over 100 drafts already from Sleeper. Right. You can look at the Sleeper ADP. It has right now here. I'll give you the overall. So you asked about the older guys. The older guys right now has Diggs at 17, Tyreek Hill at 18, and where's Davante Adams? Let me see. He might be a little higher. Adams is the end of the middle, the end of the second round, but I think those guys will move up a little bit. And then also right, you're right. So Adams did fall. He's at pick 30 overall. So that one I'll give you. But I think that's also has to do with the quarterback uncertainty. We don't know who the quarterback is going to be. We know it's not going to be Derek Carr. We know that.
I'm shocked if any of that group goes in the first round or the second round. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't care what that Sleeper ADP is. I've been in enough of these. Those guys do not belong in the first 2 rounds. As a matter of fact, I'm taking Josh Allen and Pat Mahomes over them.
All right, so let's talk about that for a second here. Okay, single quarterback league. Where should you draft? Now, in the past, the conventional wisdom, and for good reason, was wait on quarterback because your quarterback 12 is not that different than quarterback 3, and the marginal difference and then the opportunity cost of not taking that running back or wide receiver. And that still exists. But now there is such a tier of 4 or 5 that has separated themselves. But there is going to be some value later on. I mean, you and I had a discussion offline that we like Daniel Jones. We like Justin Fields for fantasy football. Right. Yeah. So isn't the argument still there? Why are we going to take Josh Allen in round 1, round 2, or Pat Mahomes when we could reasonably get Justin Fields 3 rounds later, 4 rounds later?
My first thing is I want to include Jalen Hurts in that super elite tier. He's just as good at this point of a fantasy quarterback as Allen and Mahomes is. The third, but absolutely just as good from a fantasy production standpoint. Maybe, again, equal to those guys. So I think Jalen Hurts should be in that discussion, and everybody else is a massive down tier from there. So I don't think any of the other quarterbacks are worth like a late second round pick, but I would put that trio when you're trying to make a decision. And it's exactly this. You're looking at who's available to me right now. Am I going to take Tyreek Hill, an aging wide receiver? Great. I like him. Questionable quarterback situation. Not sure what's going on there. 30 years old, 1 or 2 year window. Or can I say, you know what? I punted away. I took Josh Allen. I know I'm going to get a 30-point performance out of my quarterback almost every single week, and he's going to last me the next 7 to 10 seasons. I'll never have to worry about a quarterback again. I'm fine with that. I think that's not a bad way to build a team.
I made that. So in my very first Dynasty League, I made that mistake, and I'll call it mistake with RG3. I took him in the early 3rd round, right? And then obviously his next year, RG3 just broke. So I think where your argument does have merit is that if you have a quarterback like a Mahomes, who's got 3, 4, 5 years of top 5 production. I mean, we saw maybe it down
10,
here
from maybe 10 for Mahomes.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that already banked.
Oh, okay,
already banked. Yeah. The conversation does change. I mean, in our first startup draft that we did together in a single quarterback league, Andrew Luck went in like pick 11, and it was totally defensible at the time.
I feel like that was like one of the first ever Dynasty draft. Like Dynasty was just new, and we didn't really know. How funny was it just to think back to that? Dynasty was pretty much a new format at that point, and
ironically, Dynasty was around even before like redraft, I believe. But yes, it wasn't popular. Now Dynasty leagues, and what's great about Dynasty leagues, Geek, is nobody's in one Dynasty league. Raise your hand if you're in one Dynasty league. Nobody, right? Bueller, right? It's most people are in 5, in 8, in 10, or in my case, 41. This is crazy. I need to pare it down. I already told you I have to pare out some of my dynasty leagues this year.
Most people aren't like you. You're out of control. You can't turn down a dynasty.
You know
league.
what? If you're in the chat right now, post how many dynasty leagues you're in. If you're listening on the podcast feed, you can tweet at us at Alan Seslowsky at FFootballGeek. Let us know how many dynasty leagues you're in. We need to feel better about ourselves. This is too sick. So, Geek, I told you we could talk about this stuff all day. We're already 40 minutes in. We're trying to keep these podcasts tight. And by the way, if you are listening on the live feed, you can get the audio version of this. We're going to post these every Monday to the RotoWire Fantasy Football podcast feed. So go in there, subscribe if you want. And if you've got value from this video, sure, hit the like button. That helps us out. But back to our rankings. All right. I'm going to give you a couple more names in our top 24. And I just want you lightning round. You tell me, yes, you would take them in the second round. They're more of this is your 3 options. Yes, they're second round picks in Dynasty. More of a third round guy, or no way. I'm not taking that guy in the top 3 rounds. Okay. A couple names right here. Drake London.
Yes.
Guess what?
Second round, late second rounder.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right. Keep it going here. Chris Godwin.
No.
No what? You got okay. Let me
sorry. I thought we're talking a top 2 rounder or not. Chris Godwin for me should not be in the top 2 rounds. 4th round player.
Okay. So Godwin, I believe is going to go in the 3rd round. He's a little bit more QB proof. In fact, I'm going to be debating Matt Kelly on Chris Godwin on the Dynasty Hour. Okay. A couple more names here for you. Jalen Hurts in single quarterback league. Where does he belong?
Yeah. Jalen Hurts to me is number 3. As far as where he belongs, I think you can take him at the end of the second round based on how the draft board is going to fall this year. You're going to see there's a massive drop off in talent you're excited about as soon as you hit the mid 3rd round anyway. So late in the second round is where I see those 3 elite quarterbacks being very much takeable, right? And I'm talking Allen, Mahomes, and Hurts. And by the way, you can make an argument, and you might win that argument. Which of those 3 is the best of the trio? I've seen an argument for Mahomes. I've seen an argument for Allen, and I can make an argument for Hurts as well. Any one of them could be the number 1 as far as I'm concerned, but all of them belong in the second round, because by the time you get to the 3rd round, you're looking at it does drop off. You're looking at Mark Andrews. There's the wide receiver group.
Stop the conversation. Stop the conversation, because you just like an alarm bell just went off. Dynasty fantasy football. There's nothing worse in Dynasty than not having a tight end that you feel you could plug and play. I had to start Jonnu Smith and just hope he had 4 points in so many leagues. I'm not even talking about tight end premium. I'm not even talking about start 2. That's a nightmare. Here's the debate. Let's just go over our tight end rankings with our last with our last 10 minutes of the podcast. Now, let's forget about round, because the round in which you take your tight end is going to be based on how important you think the positional advantage is. Travis Kelce, man, I understand, Geek, that he's 34 next year, right? He's 33 and change right now. All right. Who would you take ahead of him? And even if you know you're only going to get the great tight ends seem to age a little bit better, and he's playing with Pat Mahomes. So I'm not thinking Kelsey's going to fall off the cliff here. I mean, can we take a 33-year-old going on 34 as tight end 1 in Dynasty?
No.
Okay. Why? Who would you take ahead of him?
Mark Andrews still belongs ahead of him. Kyle Pitts. If we're gonna take London, I know. Listen, I have not fallen for the Pitts. I warned everybody last year. I haven't fallen for it. People were taking him ahead of Travis Kelce. Mark Andrews coming off a down year. All of a sudden, we're going to change our opinion of this.
What if Lamar Jackson's not there next year? And you and I talked about. Oh, that's good.
A different quarterback. Who cares? He is an elite pass catching weapon. He's 27, so he's got a 6-year head start against Travis Kelce. Andrews is the number 1 tight end for me. Kelce is spectacular for your team that you built around Stephon Diggs and Devontae Adams, and you put Kelce on there, and now you're like, screw it, let me get Eckler and all the other old farts.
Here you go, Geek. Here's the tight end strategy for 2023. I'm still going to put Travis Kelce as the tight end 1, and this is why. in the time, let's see, Pitts obviously needs a little more ramp up time, right? I mean, tight ends normally take 3 years to develop, and sometimes they don't hit till year 4. I mean, look at TJ Hawkinson. He's finally hitting now. And by the way, Hawkinson's my tight end too.
Do you
but
think Des Ridder comes back as the quarterback?
No, they're going to go into the veteran market again. But hear me out here. If you take Kelsey as your tight end 1, once you get to about tight end 6, tight end 7, it's all crapshoot anyway. So the second tight end that you take, the Chigakonkwo at tight end 12, or the Alberto, if he ends up, being
no,
or Dulcich, or whoever it is there, right? I mean, Dawson Knox, Trey McBride, Evan Ingram. You're gonna get another guy like that has at least the age 27-ish, Evan Ingram. So what I'm saying is, it's such a positional advantage that you can not have to go youth. You can go nuclear and go Travis Kelce at 1, know that you have it's time to win, and still get a guy the guy who has tight end 4, who has Dallas Goedert. You can still get someone who could match or get close to that production with Darren Waller, who's going to fall like a stone, like David Njoku, who's going to be like tight end 15. So that's my point, is that go hard on Travis Kelce, and your backup youth tight end is still going to be viable, as good as someone else's number 1 tight end.
You know what the worst thing that somebody can do is? So I'm just going to bring it back to your point. You take the minute you took Travis Kelce, the minute you took any of these older guys, I think when you're doing your dynasty startup, this is the most important thing to remember. You better understand what kind of team you're building, because if you build it mishmash, you got Kelce, but you're also taking this youth.
And explain what mishmash means.
If you have no approach to this thing, like I've seen you personally go into a draft, and I've seen you do this, where you're like, I'm building a win now, right? And you say, no, I'm going to purposefully take these players that are dropping probably a little too far, because Dynasty is undervaluing veterans. And I've seen you do this, and you come out of a draft and it's got all of these. Last year it would have been having a lot of Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey shares and a little Zeke Elliott on your team.
Elliott was hold on. Zeke, that's not fair. As much as I was advocating for Zeke, it was the price on Zeke. It wasn't he was so cheap in startups.
But also a veteran value that you could get super, super late. And no one wanted him. You're getting him around 7. And then you got to you need to build a whole team around that. The problem is, the second you take Kelce, you've now set the direction of your team. You better win this year and next year. So
what's wrong with that? What's wrong with wanting to win this year or next year?
I mean, that's fine if you set your direction, but the problem is you're assuming that people understand that they're setting the direction. You can't take Kelce and then be like, all right, let me grab some Bijans or some rookies or some questionable people or some high upside.
Right. Like what you're saying is like you can't have okay, I'm just going to make up a hypothetical here. If you have Kelce, you don't want your wide receiver core to be something like Treylon Burks, right, who's on the upswing, Terry McLaurin, and Rashad Bateman. Those guys are fine as depth or your wide receiver 3s, but when you're banking on those 3 guys every week, then Kelce might not be a team fit. I understand that. But what I'm saying is
decision points that you'd have to make, right?
But
I'll tell you exactly.
But Geek, just 1 second here. Just what I'm saying is that when you're building a dynasty team, you could think you know the direction you're going in. But when you're sitting in round 3 and you've taken 2 good players, because all the players in round 1 and round 2 are going to be startable every week, but you're sitting there at 3.3 and Travis Kelce staring you in the face, you got to take that guy. You can't worry about what you thought your team direction was going to be.
No, if the value is there, great. But if you put your chips in and you take this kind of player a little bit too early, or you take 1 or 2 of these spots, you've got Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce on your team now. Oh, reconstituting the old Chiefs. Or I'll just give you decision points so you'll understand. You'll get this. You'll get what I'm saying. Now, let's say it's a little later in the draft and you're looking at Amari Cooper, but also Jamison Williams, right? And you're like, ooh, young prospect.
Okay.
Good draft thing. Or do I take the yeoman-like, not super sexy Amari Cooper, who's probably going to be a super productive veteran for me for the next couple of years?
Those 2 guys. Yeah, those 2 guys, you're right. They're going to be close in ADP, but fine. But that's going to be like in round 6. I'm talking about if you have to decide what your tight end strategy is early on, but sometimes the strategy decides for you. And what I think is that if Travis Kelce, the biggest positional advantage, and I think is in play for the 1.1 in redraft leagues, certainly in premium leagues, and if he falls to round 3, which he will in dynasty startup drafts, you need to seriously consider him. In a dynasty league, I actually traded away. I've been trading for Travis Kelce last year. This year, I'm trading him away, not because I don't want him, because I'm getting offers. Like someone gave me an injured Kyle Pitts and Dameon Pierce. I took that on for Travis Kelce, and I'm not even sure that was the right move.
So you just made the point of why Kelce is a unique asset amongst these other situations where I talk about older running backs like that are a little bit harder to get value for. One thing that you're able to do with Travis Kelce, specifically Travis Kelce, is late in the season, if your team's not competitive, the team that looks like it can win or their competitor. In other words, effectively, you could go to any of the top 3 teams in the league, and it's such an advantage for them to acquire a Kelce in a championship run season that you can actually extract full value for that player just because that person will be like, you know what, I've been plugging in, I've been plugging in David Njoku or Patty Freiermuth or whatever.
Or Dalton Schultz in a non-productive week or whatever it is.
Whoever you've been plugging, and you're like, wow, Kelce kind of always gets you 25. That'll help me win this championship. I'll give you my George Kittle plus a first rounder to do this right now. So you can make that move with a Kelce because of the positional advantage. You might not be able to pull that off with, with the Stephon Diggs type play.
All right, that's going to conclude our episode 1 of the Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast for RotoWire, our very early rankings, which, by the way, if you play Dynasty, you already know it's not very early. This is when Dynasty season starts. So a couple programming notes here. By the way, if you got value from this video, and consider hitting the like button, and that's if you don't want to do that, that's fine as well. This live stream will be on every Monday. Next Monday, by the way, Martin Luther King Day, it won't be on. We'll be on Tuesday. But every Monday, come back for a live stream. Geek will be here with me many times. I'm going to have rotating guests. A couple other programming notes is that on SiriusXM, we have a new Dynasty show called The Dynasty Hour. It is premiering this week. It should be on the week of the 14th and 15th on while the football games are on. So it'll also be on demand. Just search RotoWire or the Dynasty Hour of rotating guests, including Matt Kelly, Jordan McNamara, of course, the Geek from the Sharp app from DFS Army. You follow him at FFootballGeek. You follow him at the Sharp app, at DFS Army. On all our video, our links are in the video description below. I'm at Alan Seslowsky. Again, thank you all for joining us. We'll be back with all Dynasty content. And Geek, anything else you want to promote that you're doing real quick?
No, obviously you mentioned everything. We've got the fantasy playoffs. The DFS playoffs is my favorite time of year. And what I'm doing right now over at DFS Army is we're back testing these smaller slates. So to get ready for the 4 games, the 3 games, the 2 gamers that are coming up, we're kind of running through, back testing everything, remembering the types of approaches that help you win these style of tournaments.
So if you want to win money on basically, I'm not a good DFS player.
You're good.
But I'm an okay, but when I go over to your Discord and when I come into follow your Twitter, I get all these plays and I end up cashing at least. So if you want, and this is no BS, the Geek is actually he's the founding member of DFS Army. He was on it before DraftKings was even blowing up. So anyone at this point that doesn't know DFS Army and how it actually gives you an edge is just basically losing money giving it. So go over and follow him over there. He'll tell you everything there. All right, everybody. Thanks for following us on the Dynasty Rankings. We'll be back next week with a new episode.